cross-education is a beautiful thing. How many of you, when you think about cross-education, that provides some hope? I mean, you need to remember that as far as when you're taking people forwards. Okay, now there's this thing called bilateral deficit. Okay, now here's the whole thing. Let's just say that your buddy Joe decides he's going to start training again. And all of a sudden, Joe hadn't worked out in forever, and Joe goes over to the rec and loads up the easy curl bar. Which, why would Joe load up the easy curl bar first? Because that's what every person does when they come back to the gym. They go to biceps first. Watch and learn. It's crazy. So Joe walks up, easy curl bar, getting ready to do bicep curls. All of a sudden, let's just say for the sake of easy math, it's a 35-pound bar, and I put, easy math. Let's just say I put a 25 on one. Where are we with math? And then a 25 on the other. Where are we? 25 on each side and a 35-pound bar. Where am I? What? 85. Okay, so all of a sudden, I am going to preload. I am going to all of a sudden, size principle, recruit the ones I need. And all of a sudden, he's going to get that done. He's going to do 3 sets, 10 reps, trying to make things happen. Well, because he didn't think that one bicep exercise was enough, he says, you know what? I'm going to all of a sudden do some curls. Okay, here's what bilateral deficit tells us. Listen, the force produced when both limbs contract together is lower than the sum of the forces when they are contracted unilaterally. Class is thinking. So say this again. The force produced when both limbs are contracted together. So how much did I contract together? 85 pounds. Okay. This is lower than the sum of the forces they produce when they are contracted unilaterally. So what does that tell you? If I went over and did single arm curls, what would I really be able to do unilaterally? More weight. So what was my total sum? 85. So in reality, because the body is so great, all of a sudden, could I realistically go up to 50-pound dumbbells and do a 50-pound curl and a 50-pound curl? You really could. Even though these two added together would be 100, I can't do 100 when I am bilateral. Okay? That kind of makes sense when you think about cross-education. This side is actually helping this side when I curl here. This side is actually helping this side when I curl here. But when you engage both, there's a deficit. It's interesting the way the body is put together. But also, for our field, what does that tell you we need to do? Not only train bilateral, but what do we need to do? We need to do unilateral training. So we need to do single leg squats. We need to do single arm lifts occasionally. Because all of a sudden, the force produced unilaterally when they are added up is greater. So if you're not doing any unilateral training, you need to start doing that. It's a really efficient and effective way. Also, you're tapping into all those proprioceptors. You're working on balance. How many of you really do any balance training? I'm a believer in balance training. Okay? If you haven't done any balance training in a while, add that to your things. Okay? Now look at this. Let's talk about bilateral facilitation. Bilateral means what? Both sides. So whenever I facilitate both sides, I have a voluntary activation of the agonist group. Okay? Not the antagonist group, but the agonist group. which means if I all of a sudden come to this part of my curl, I'm better here because of bilateral facilitation. When it comes to the antagonist part or the eccentric part, it ain't going to be as efficient. But all of these things are going on in your brain. Okay, let's talk about some muscular adaptations. One of my favorite things on the planet is muscular hypertrophy. What in the world is muscular hypertrophy? Muscle getting bigger. Now, here's what we need to understand. As muscles start to grow, we actually see, you guys remember what this is? What is this? Actin and myosin. Whenever they go back and forth, what is that called? Sliding filament theory. Now, let's just say that you take a really skinny actin and a really skinny myosin, you slide them back and forth through a progressive overload training program of Fab 5. Guess what happens? This skinny myosin gets what? Bigger. This was actin, sorry. This skinny myosin, what does it do? It gets bigger too. So this one, what's the smallest unit called? A sarcomere. So what you have is, you have individual sarcomeres growing in size. You're not getting more sarcomeres. You're having individual sarcomeres get bigger. That's how muscular hypertrophy takes place. This is a beautiful thing. So do you get more sarcomeres? No. What happens? Each individual sarcomere grows. And because those sarcomeres are still in an individual muscle cell and they grow and they're still within that cell wall, that's how you get stronger. That cell wall keeps the muscle integrity growing. It's a beautiful thing. Now, again, it talks about actin and myosin, how those new myofilaments, those bigger sarcomeres, actually start to make a bigger change. Now, you heard me say this last week. We talk about the process of myogenesis, which means making muscle. It's a beautiful thing. The actin and the myosin, which were skinny, they actually come together and they make larger muscle, stronger muscle through the process of myogenesis. Now, here's what we know. What happens and what is the recipe, what is the formula for muscular hypertrophy? Fab 5. Say it again. What is it? Large muscle groups, heavy resistance,
low risk,
moderate to high volume. Okay, volume is 3. Okay, 4, short rest, 5, 2 years of experience to make those adaptations. Now, here's the thing. I love this because this is basically excuse proofing. Okay, the magnitude of hypertrophy that you get ultimately depends on the training stimulus and the manner in which acute training variables are prescribed. You know what? Your body will respond to whatever you ask it to. It's up to you. And you guys, do you remember when maybe you were a kid or you always heard someone say, "My dog ate my homework"? Y'all remember that saying? Yes or no? Yes. When people say they don't have time to hypertrophy or time to Fab 5 train, that's like a little kid saying, "The dog ate my homework." You have 20 minutes a day to Fab 5 train. It does not take a full hour.